Well, thank you, Stephen, for being here today. It was great to talk with you today because honestly, I got really excited. I'm like, oh, I get to talk to Mr. Negative. Okay.
Yeah.
So I, I have to ask, going in when you auditioned for Martin, Mr. Negative, did you know about the character beforehand, or was this your first introduction to him?
First introduction.
Okay.
Had no idea. Didn't even know that I was auditioning for Spider-Man, to be quite
Mm.
honest. Yeah,
It,
I
wa-
just
it,
knew that we were at Sony,
mhm.
at their motion capture studio in LA, and it was very exciting. And it was going to be, we knew it was a big video game and that it was a villain. And I think one of the descriptions was like, they just wanted somebody that was super suave, but very dangerous.
Mhm.
Was able to switch between English and Mandarin Chinese. So, for me, there was like a lot of pressure. It's like, don't already with lines, it's like, okay, don't forget lines. And then it's like
Mhm.
doing it in multiple languages. It's like, okay. And then also to be like super cool, but also super dangerous again. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Oh, you definitely seemed like you had a lot of fun. When you went in, was it always proposed as this is going to be not just voice acting but mocapping as well in terms of your likeness, or was it
Yes,
something? Okay.
they said in the breakdown that it was going to be full motion capture, full performance capture
Hmm.
with the face. As far as likeness, I think they had mentioned something like that they may use the likeness. I
Hmm.
think they reserve the right to do something different if they wanted to. And
Hmm.
then, for me, I don't know how it is nowadays, but back then there was even like a test after the audition
Mm.
to put the dots on to see if your face expressions were compatible with the system that they had for animation. So already that was like a little bit nerve wracking too, because it's like, okay, sure, you can act, but now on the technical side,
Mm.
are you compatible with their system? So that was quite a doozy for me.
It must have been nerve wracking because, like, I know how to act. Like, you were, this is what you wanted to do from early on, and it's like, okay, now you have to be good enough for the technical sense because there's always like technology is always advancing,
Yeah.
especially with this kind of industry where you're mocapping and you're having to be tracked. Was that like obviously you've done other video game work like since then? I think this was your first video game, or was you've done?
Yeah, this was my first like starring
Okay.
where it was like my face and it was
Hmm.
my voice and it was all that, right? I had done a lot of the cinematic trailers for Blur Studio.
Mm, yes.
So a lot of like that Star Wars, the Old Republic,
Hmm.
lightsaber fighting, all that kind of stuff. I was doing a lot of that. So a lot of my body was used, a lot of my motion was used. But yeah, this was the first where it was everything, and
All
yeah, I wanted
encompassing.
it bad. Yeah, I
Hmm.
wanted it so
Yeah.
bad. So then after that audition, it was like now it's kind of up to the universe whether or not the system was even compatible. I feel very grateful that everything worked out.
Oh, it definitely did because I remember I replayed the game actually recently to the first one and going, I love how they're slowly, like subtly, like we know as the audience, like, hey, this is not a good guy. But the way you're interacting with Peter and Aunt May, I'm like, okay, oh boy. I like how it really played off because you really did a good job with having that lighthearted, charismatic, but then it's like this is who he actually is behind the scenes. It
Oh,
was
thank you.
it was
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. The Insomniac team initially, again because Mr. Negative was kind of a newish character, and especially in video games and across all media, it's kind of a new character to the rogues gallery. They had a lot of opportunity to figure it out, right? To explore, to make something new and different with the portrayal. And I think ultimately they settled upon this final version that you see, nice looking dude in a suit, very, very amiable, and then has this super duper dark side. And I think they probably saw something in me as well, where they
Mhm.
just said, yeah, it's because there were many times where Brian Intihar would literally say, just do you be yourself, right? Like be your nice guy self,
Hmm.
because there's a nice guy Steven, and then there's this like evil bastard kind of like, because I did martial arts. Obviously, I was doing
Hmm.
stunts, coming up in my career this whole time. So I kind of have that mindset as well, like for the fighting and things of that nature. So I think they wanted to bring out both of those, and I'm glad it went over well with the fans. I'm telling you, I still remember, when Mr. Negative was announced on the trailer for the first game, and I remember looking at comments and people were like, "Who is this Asian guy in a suit?" Right? They didn't know who he was. And then we go to Hall H, San Diego Comic Con, and I think it was like 2018 or 17, something like
Yeah.
that. And they announced the cast, and I come out and they're like Stephen Oyoung and Mr. Negative, and I'm telling you, Hall H, 8,000 people. I'll never forget it. Silence, like crickets, because nobody knew who Mr. Negative was. And
Yeah.
now, cut to 6 years later, Mr. Negative is a household name, all thanks to this video game. So it's very cool to see that.
Yeah, because I think the idea for this game was to elevate certain villains that maybe had not gotten a lot of like actual like presence in terms of outside of comics. So, and now without really getting to spoilers, because we really don't know anything about what your role is in the second game, it's interesting that we're only seeing a little bit. And I don't know how like what
Yes,
that means in terms of your actual role in the game, but like what they
right.
do show of you in the marketing has been very interesting
Yeah,
for
no,
sure.
well, number one, I thought it was super cool to even be brought back. Um, you know, I did not expect that. I thought Martin would just be locked up in the raft, right, for the rest of eternity.
Mhm.
Okay, or for the rest of however many games that they're going to do this. Yeah, so to be asked to come back was amazing. I'm so grateful for that. And number two, his look, super awesome.
Mhm.
Again, props to Jacinda Chu and everybody at Insomniac, the art director, for like making Mr. Negative look like he looks now. Long hair with the beard. I love that. I've seen some comments online where people are saying he looks like Adam Driver or Keanu Reeves or Moist Critical, and I'm like, yeah,
Mhm.
I'll take it all. Those are all cool dudes.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, and as far as the actual scope of the character, again, that's got to be a surprise. But what isn't a surprise is there is for sure a confrontation,
Mhm.
between Miles and Martin. A long time coming.
Yes.
Martin
Yes, exactly.
obviously,
Yes.
yeah, Martin's obviously responsible for the death of Miles' father. So, what you see in the trailer really is it's it's going to give the fans, I think, what they want and what they've been waiting for sure.
It's a good tease because we have been waiting for this. And honestly, I was expecting you to pop up in Miles's game because
Right. You would
yeah,
have thought, right? I mean,
they
I
made
would.
us wait. They made us wait.
That's right. That's right. I would have thought as well. No, I did some motion capture though
Mm,
for Miles. Some of the guards,
mhm.
yeah, with their energy weapons and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So that was very nice of Insomniac to ask me back for that as well. Had a lot of fun.
Whenever you do mocap work, I'm curious, like, do you have to be very cognizant of like every single move you do because like that is being tracked? Like, if there's any wrong move, it could like the flow of it could go off or something. I'm just curious because I've never actually spoke to someone who actually does mocap. Like,
Sure.
that's gonna be very like weird. Like any movement you make, it's like being
Yes,
tracked.
listen, you're not wrong. It can absolutely get to that point,
Hmm.
especially when it comes to gameplay. I've done some gameplay mechanics, like for Kingpin, for example,
Hmm.
like some of the fighting mechanics, stuff like that. It can get very specific. For cinematics, also as well. You're like, the animators have a very clear idea of what they need you to be doing, and they're going to animate it. So you need to help them out a little bit. So yeah, it can get very, very extremely detailed. Absolutely. As far as like, are you worried about it? I actually feel like doing motion capture, doing performance capture is super liberating
Mhm.
because the whole process is very different than film and TV. You're not focused on the camera, and you're not limited by the camera or by lighting. The 360-degree volume that you're in,
Mhm.
all those cameras, right? They track your movement everywhere you are, no matter what. So you know, uh, you don't have to wait for somebody else's coverage. You just
Mhm.
do what you have to do. And then you also have the camera right on your face, literally like attached to a helmet to your face. So you don't have to worry about lenses, things of that nature. You
Mhm.
can literally just make a natural performance. It's the closest thing to being alive in whatever world that you're working in my opinion.
So when you were doing the mocap, were you also doing the actual dialogue that at that point, or did you go and do dialogue separately?
Yeah,
Whenever.
absolutely.
Okay.
So, on the scenes that you see, that is what we laid down. That is how we're talking. Very rarely are you doing the performance and then, sometimes you might have to chase it or do some additional dialogue if some word got jumbled or if sound was kind of an issue. But usually with Insomniac, with Sony, frankly, with all the mocap, like every team does a really good job of trying to get it right there, then and there when you're filming it.
That's good because I would think that you're able to get more stuff done if you're able to capture everything within that moment versus having to go in later because then you have to try to lip sync it up and it's like.
Yeah, and the feeling might be different.
Mhm.
So the tone might be different from when you're doing it. Yeah, and there is a big difference from doing it on the stage and then going into a booth where you're kind of alone and you
Mhm.
just have to chase it on a monitor.
Mhm.
There is sort of a different feeling just for the actor themselves.
Yeah, I agree because I remember hearing from Kevin Conroy, who of course was
Oh yeah,
Batman, how
yeah,
Arkham Knight, that final game he did, like he literally spent like hours and hours, days and days just in a booth, just going over lines. And I'm thinking that has to get to you mentally. And so for you to be able to go out there and actually interact and to do it in the moment versus just being stuck in a booth, I mean that must be a very different experience. I'm guessing that that's appealing because I've noticed since then you've done a lot of video games since
yeah,
because it gives you a whole new way to approach acting. It gives you a whole way to approach bringing a character to life. Is you actually
yeah.
get to physically do it, or you're more involved in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. You always acting is all about relating to other characters, to your environment, to the people around you. That's part of the story. Very rarely are we, making stories where it's just a person by themselves,
Mhm.
right? So, yeah, you always want to be interacting with your fellow co-stars. It's just more fun that way too.
Mhm.
And it's more real. You can play off of each other and yeah, I mean, speaking of being in the booth, yes, there are many times where you almost feel like you're going insane because maybe you'll have 100, 200 lines that you're going to get through in one session,
Mhm.
and it just kind of machine gun rapid fire and you're reading all this stuff and you got to give a performance for each and every line. And for me, a big part of performance is finding the context. So, can you imagine doing context for like 200 lines? Yeah, it can.
Yeah.
It can be like that. And back to your point as well, Spider-Man was the first kind of starring role vehicle for myself in video games, where you see not only my body capture, but also my voice and my face capture. And so, yeah, that video game opened up so many doors. I mean, the only reason I'm in any other video game is because of Spider-Man. The only reason people in the video game industry know me is because of Spider-Man. So, very grateful for that.
Yeah, I think they did a great job casting you because I can't think of anybody else as Mr. Negative besides you,
Oh,
that voice and like that presence. It's so good.
I appreciate that.
It's
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah, and I really look forward to your appearance and what you're gonna do in Spider-Man 2, and hopefully more. Maybe you're gonna keep appearing. I don't know. I don't know what the plan is.
I'm with you. Hey, I always say I'll go serve coffee at
Oh,
Insomniac if they ask me to. That's cool. Whatever.
yeah.
I'll do whatever.
You also voiced a little character called Jason Todd
I
in,
sure did. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. And
Ho
now it's on I believe Gotham Knights is on Game Pass now. So
Yeah.
I think more people are kind of being exposed to the game. I think in a few years, I think people will come back to that game
Mhm.
and appreciate it for what it did. But yeah, it was an awesome experience. We shot that during COVID.
Oh, really?
So
Okay.
yeah, so the initial plan, was to go up to Montreal and to do the motion capture, the
Mhm.
face capture, and instead, what happened was we had two teams. So that was a case where you had most of the motion capture and performance capture being done by the talented stunt folk over in Montreal, and then the main cast would be here in LA, and we
Mhm.
were chasing dialogue on in a booth.
Mhm.
So you're talking about, again, thousands of lines. But yeah, who doesn't want to be part of not only the Marvel universe but the DC universe as well? And who doesn't love Red Hood himself, Jason Todd?
Exactly.
Yeah, that was like a dream come true. It's the closest I could get to being Batman himself. In fact, that was kind of just my initial go-to for my inspiration for the character. It was like, oh, this is your time to be Batman. Be your Batman. I'll do that.
That I remember playing that game and loving the switching between the characters, and I love how complex Red Hood Jason Todd is in general, and I like that you were able to portray that and show the kind of polar opposite to him at times, where that aggression comes out, where
Right.
it's like, because you know his
Yeah.
past, you know what he's been through, and it's
Yeah.
really hard for him to agree with others because he has the one mindset. And that's kind of like Martin, where he has that polar opposite at the times where, the back and forth.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you caught on to that. I mean, it's the writing team at WB Montreal, the creative team, they were lovely people and super talented. And, they made a really big point to me to say, hey, don't just get stuck down this rabbit hole of being the emo, angry guy.
mhm,
They kept hammering that and really emphasizing that to me in the portrayal. They wanted Jason to be this well-rounded kind of see more facets to him than what everybody in the mainstream kind of was expecting.
mhm.
So I feel like they did a good job with that. And yeah, there's absolutely a similarity, I think, between Martin and Jason. They're both come from a tragic background. They lost their parents uh, to some nefarious criminal. Uh, they were both like victimized by a nefarious criminal. I mean, right?
Yep.
And they're both on a quest for vengeance, and their methodology is criminal as well.
Yeah.
So I do love that duality, and I do love playing characters that you can really sympathize with, but that are also extremely dangerous or badass. Let's just be real, right?
Yes.
I
Yes.
love that. Yeah, because when I was coming up, a lot of my career was uh, kind of just being the fight guy. It was very like one note, and
Mhm.
so to be able to now get in to play these characters that have that range is very satisfying.
Oh yes, because it definitely gives the audience member more to think about in terms of their character versus, oh, they're kind of just the one note, like saying, don't go to the rabbit hole of just one note with Jason. There's more to him. And I think that was interesting about Mr. Negative too, is that yes, he is a villain, but then you see his backstory. Like Peter finds out like what happened to him specifically that turned him into Mr. Negative. And so
Right.
I felt like that was good. And I think you really brought that across because when Martin's confronted by Peter about this, he's obviously very hurt. He doesn't want to talk about this. This is very personal for him, but I think it came across very well to us playing the game and going, there's more to this villain. I like that there's a duality. There's more to than just, oh, they're just evil to be evil.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that that theme plays across the entire Spider-Man universe.
Mhm.
I mean, even Spider-Man himself has this duality between, he's wrestling with his heroic persona and his normal Peter Parker side. And Doc Ock is very similar as well,
Yeah.
right? So I think in that regard, Martin Lee absolutely is part and parcel, is peas in a pod with the Spider-Man universe. So
Mhm.
it was really cool to be able to do that. And yeah, and actually, when we were filming that, I'm gonna get a little personal. Like my father, like passed basically while I was making that video game.
Mhm.
So it was very personal to me when you have to see Martin's origin and how his parents basically, whatever, spoiler alert, but Norman does bad things to them. And so it was, watching that, it was like, oh, okay, all right, talk about realism, you know. So it was, yeah, very personal to me as well.
It really came across, and I'm sorry that you lost your father, but eh,
Oh, thank you.
I'm it's also that's how life just throws curveballs at you, and in that time, you're also given this opportunity to play a character that has a similar situation in a sense that must have made it more personal for you to really give it your all when that time in the story happens.
Oh,
So that
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do think that Martin Lee is kind of a culmination of certainly a high point for myself,
Mhm.
not only professionally but just personally, to be able to play a character that looks like me. Like,
Mhm.
first of all, that was very rare. It was only starting to happen,
Mhm.
years ago, that you have this facial likeness in video games. So for that to happen, and like I said, I was a stunt guy coming up, right? So I was always the nameless, faceless henchman. So to be able to have a character that was in a huge franchise
Mhm.
and they were going to let people see me, right? That was huge. And then the guy's also a martial arts master. I had been training most of my young adult life to be a martial arts master. So to be able to, show off those skills or to use those skills was awesome. And then I'm fighting Spider-Man, like the one of, if not the biggest superhero
Yeah.
franchise in history,
Mhm.
right? Like I said, one of the first things that we shot was the subway fight.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, and so I'm like, I'm pinching myself, man.
Yeah.
I'm pinching myself that I'm able to do all of this. Yeah, and I never would have expected video games would be such a huge part of my career. I always thought, okay, I was doing film and TV,
Mhm.
and then, here we are, Spider-Man comes out. Like I said, it changed my life. The only reason I even have a voiceover agent now is because of Spider-Man. And this is how naive I was. Even after Spider-Man, the first game came out, my manager was like, "Hey, do you want to talk to a voiceover agent?" And I was like, maybe. I don't really know. I didn't really know. Yeah, I had no exactly. I had no idea how huge the whole industry is, right?
Mhm.
So that's how much of a baby I was when it came to that.
Well, we're very happy. We're all very happy that you are Mr. Negative, and we cannot wait to see you in Spider-Man 2 confronting Miles. Well, he's more confronting you on
Right. That's
October
right.
on October 20th. We cannot wait to see. I cannot wait to see what happens. Like
That's right.
this is a lot of build up. Thank you so much, Stephen, for talking with me today. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Absolutely. Let's
Thank you.
fight October 20th. Let's do it.
Let there be Venom.
Exactly.